If there's one thing that matters more to anyone living in the modern era, it's the price of everything. How much does something cost these days? How much is a subscription to that service? How much will rent be in the future? What about car payments, childcare, or the food that's on your table? The cost of everything is rising. I don't need to tell you that because you know as well as I do that it is. Every month, it feels like I'm paying more for the exact same things I've been using for years. Netflix keeps going up, Amazon Prime. Somehow, even game prices are going up despite players opting out of buying new games these days. And then there's that one company that has found the apparent cheat code, which is Nintendo. Not only are their games objectively the most expensive to buy today, they're also one of the most efficiently ran video game companies in the world. Nintendo has notoriously low budgets for most of their biggest games, although Nintendo never actually publicly gives those numbers. Based on many articles and more, it's usually understood collectively that Nintendo's games cost, well, pretty much next to nothing when you compare it to games made in the West. Pokemon games alone have ridiculously low budgets. We know based on leaks that Legend ZA or ZA, however you want to say it, had a budget of about $10 to $13 million only, which meant that Nintendo only needed to sell roughly 200,000 copies of Legends to cover their costs. It actually ended up doing about 5 to 6 million units in a single week, so they made a ridiculous amount of money for what they spent on it. In the world of AAA, most westernized properties, they do need to sell millions upon millions to even remotely make their budgets back, but not if you're named Nintendo. And now, even the so-called bulletproof armor of Nintendo, it's actually getting cracked. But it's for the next big problem in gaming which is coming, and that is memory chips. As WCCF Tech reported here, Nintendo just lost billions of dollars in value due to memory shortages, and this fall is not stopping anytime soon. This is not necessarily unique to Nintendo, since places like Samsung already are making changes to their business or even framework as seen here, confirms that prices are going through the roof for memory chips, but they apparently still won't overcharge for them, which, yeah, I'll believe that when I see it. But this news all started and originated from Bloomberg.com, which confirmed that Nintendo had lost billions because they decided to release a new console during a digital famine is pretty much the best way that I can describe it. Bloomberg confirmed that Nintendo's shares have dropped about 4.7% so far already, which is roughly $14 billion in value, which to some that might not sound too bad. Oh, only 4.7%? Yeah, but this is Nintendo, guys, not Activision or someone else. If Nintendo isn't able to retain their worth because of how the world is going around them, everyone is pretty much going to suffer immeasurably underneath them too. Also, if you want more content, consider subscribing and all that YouTube stuff. Thank you, because like I said, Nintendo is pretty much the kings of efficiency. Their games cost nothing to make in the grand scheme. They charge premium price points of $80 American, which is like $100 Canadian. It's just insane. Like recently, okay, I went to a store to see some Nintendo games, and dude, the Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 bundle for Switch is $100 for me to buy right now. Like, that is absurd. And these prices are not going to drop because it's a first-party Nintendo game. As Bloomberg reported here, out of the last 8 days, 7 of those Nintendo lost value in. And this is leading to, as they say there, optimism fading about the longevity of the Nintendo Switch 2's lifespan overall. Again, this is all because of the rapidly increasing price of memory chips, which is absolutely plaguing everything. And considering the rise of AI pretty much everywhere is causing all of these companies to stockpile as many chips as humanly possible. Yeah, it's getting bleak out there. The exact reason why this memory war, I guess I'll call it, is affecting Nintendo so badly is because the Nintendo Switch 2 specifically uses a 12GB RAM. RAM, in case you don't know, it stands for Random Access Memory. Anyways, these RAM chips needed to power the Switch 2 have jumped, as seen here from WCCF Tech, by a staggering 41%, dude, which has caused panic because this will 1000% now reduce the likelihood of the Switch 2 ever getting cheaper in the future. The exact opposite will be happening instead. The Switch 2 will now just get even more expensive because Nintendo will need to recoup the cost of those RAM chips that are skyrocketing in prices that they clearly need to make the thing work in the first place. Bloomberg also confirmed that Nintendo's master plan here is not to eat the cost of the Switch 2 themselves, but instead make you pay for it instead. Here's what Pelham Smithers of Pelham Smithers Associates said when interviewed by Bloomberg. The rise in prices is starting to really impact Express SD card prices. A 256GB Express SD card costs $89.99 on Amazon. This is effectively a cost that Nintendo has passed on to the gamer. Yup, this is why I wanted to cover this story among other things in this video. It's not a pity party for Nintendo that I'm trying to get at here. The point of why I think this is very important is simple. It's because not Nintendo, but you, the people buying and playing video games, are actually going to be the ones who are going to get screwed in the end with this. And I want you to know about it because, well, you deserve to know it because this is really awful. Like, okay, I own a Switch 2. I bought one to review Pokemon Legends ZA for the channel a while back if you saw those videos. However, looking at other Switch 2 titles, I feel as if I don't really want to buy any of their other titles really for like a really simple reason, and that is the price of them. Nintendo's just way too expensive to keep up with if I'm being honest. It's insane how when you truly compare Nintendo's philosophy for how they view the average gamer on their platform versus say the average gamer on Steam or PlayStation, it's day and night. On Steam or PlayStation, you're able to buy dozens of games like all the time, even first-party games in PlayStation's case for much cheaper than full price like all the time. With Nintendo, that isn't really the case. Instead, if I want to buy The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom for Switch 2, it's $114 Canadian, and that price is not really dropping much. As seen here in Canada where I live, Tears of the Kingdom at its lowest is currently $85 Canadian, down from $99 normally on the Switch 1. Wow, thanks Nintendo, what a steal. Not much of a sale if I'm being honest, but that's just how Nintendo's been operating for years now. All of their first-party offerings, they rarely go down in any real price. The best you're going to get is maybe like I showed you there, 10 or 15 bucks off years after these games have already released. It genuinely just makes my Switch 2 feel like a paperweight that I now own solely that I'm going to use, I guess, for reviewing games on that system when I have to for the channel, rather than something that I want to actively invest into, because the entire point of owning a Switch is to play those first-party exclusives that are only on Nintendo platforms, obviously. But if those games are charging me an arm and a leg to buy them, then why would I invest further into that console's library? Fire Emblem Engage, for example, haven't played it yet, but as seen here, it's $80 still in Canada, a game that is years old at this point. The entirety of Nintendo's philosophy here, it's just so anti-consumer and just pro-Nintendo, it's getting ridiculous. If it's not their games barely if ever dropping in price, then the console itself will now get even more expensive due to this ongoing memory war. As WCCF Tech states here, they theorize that despite the Nintendo Switch 2 having some discounts for Black Friday, the be-all end-all point is that these games and systems ecosystem that Nintendo is pushing is not going to get better for people who buy into it. In fact, it will only get more expensive, which makes the Switch and Switch 2 ecosystem as a whole, frankly, way less enticing and borderline pointless to invest into if I'm being honest with you. When outside of those ridiculously priced first-party games that will barely ever fall in price, all the third-party offerings objectively will just play better and look much better, nicer and all of that on, say, a Steam console. I'm being stupid. A PC. Why did I say Steam console? Keep it in the video. Or PlayStation, by the way, while also being cheaper too. And it's actually in Nintendo's best interest not to raise the prices on the Switch 2 if they want to continue that forward momentum, but I don't really think Nintendo cares right now. They likely just believe that they're the kings of everything in the end either way, so them pushing more expensive games or not won't really matter because the loyal fan base will still show up regardless. But I do think that people are starting to wake up, because if in the wake of finding out your RAM chips are going to be insanely expensive, that your bright idea is to just raise the price of your entire ecosystem instead of lowering it, especially after the hype and honeymoon phase is over with already, is kind of insane to me. Like, if you're a parent who buys your kid kid games? Objectively speaking, unless you're swimming in money yourself, it's just cheaper to make your kid play a PlayStation or an Xbox or a Steam in the long Steam again, a PC. God, I keep saying that. Whatever. It just is what it is, okay? If your kids play Switch, you're very aware already that you are paying an arm and a leg every time you buy a new first-party game, and you always will no matter what you do. As WCCF Tech further reported here, Nintendo has already attempted to calm investors' nerves and claim that they will not be raising the price of their products for the foreseeable future, but there's a caveat there, of course. Shuntaro Furukawa, who is the president of Nintendo, he said this to investors recently. The company expects to maintain the current level of profitability for hardware for the time being, unless there are significant changes in external factors such as a shift in tariff assumptions or other unexpected events. Ah, there it is. Significant changes in external factors, he said. Yeah, you mean like memory chips exploding in price? Because there's just not nearly enough of them to go around, you mean? I mean, Bloomberg further drove the stake even deeper, as they posted this graph showcasing how, according to their analysis, companies like Nintendo, or even Sony, are seeing downward trends of their businesses getting better due to the ongoing memory war, and those prices skyrocketing to produce the new products that they need, as Bloomberg further stated here. Nintendo seems to be very much aware of this downward trend, and has started to bundle Mario Kart World, for example, as free when buying a Switch 2 to entice players to purchase their console. This is actually being seen as very uncharacteristic of Nintendo to do these days, but it is, as they say there, Nintendo is worried about attracting new players outside of their ecosystem. And again, this all ties back to what I was saying before, which is that Nintendo's ecosystem's buy-in is their biggest problem. Because even if you're an adult with some money, objectively, as a cost versus saving perspective, you know 100% that the Switch 2 is a money sink if you buy into it over other consoles and what other things are available out there, pretty much. The only options there are to get third-party games that run and will look worse on Switch 2, or you pay prices no other game company dares tries to for their first-party offerings. Like, for example, if you're a Steam user, you genuinely just don't need a Switch unless you really need to play the new Pokemon game, I guess. But the games outside of that first-party lineup, you really have no reason to buy anything there at all, especially with the Steam Deck existing too. And this memory chip problem also translates over to another big issue with Switch and Switch 2, which is another criticism of Nintendo, which is the space of the SD cards that they use as well. For those that don't know, the Switch 2 comes with 256 gigabytes of internal storage, which is good if all you want to play is like Pokemon or some SNES style games maybe. But once you get into the bigger offerings, especially when it comes to third party wise, this memory problem immediately starts to get bad. As Square Enix confirmed for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth on Switch 2, that game will take up roughly 90 to 95 gigabytes of space when it releases on the console, which means if you do own a Switch 2, you either need to delete games quite often when you play them, or you can stock up on external SD cards to swap out to play what you want at any given time, which is also going to be pricey because again, those are going up in price too. While this is not a unique Switch 2 problem, I know that, it is however an issue because the Switch 2 has less than half the storage space of say a PS5 base model as well. In general, players will need more space, not less these days, and if you're on Switch 2, you're going to be paying more for it too. And with how this chip stuff has been going, this is not working in their favor. It isn't the first time either. The original Switch faced also a 20% drop in production rates back in 2021 as well. That was also due to chips also being scarce, back then too, which ate into Nintendo's bottom line. Objectively, if you did want to buy into Nintendo's ecosystem, it would cost you less to buy in now than it would later, if I'm being real with you guys. Because ultimately, the exact same console will undoubtedly end up costing more come 2026. When, and not if, these RAM prices start affecting Nintendo's bottom line even more. Sure, Nintendo could eat those costs and make the difference on software sales, but this is Nintendo that we're talking about, of course. If they can find a way to not pay for something and make you, the customer, do it for them instead, they're gonna do just that, and we all know it. I mean, Nintendo is already getting away with charging more on Switch 2 versions of games that run basically the same on Switch 1 hardware. Look at this from Vice. Metroid Prime 4 players are regretting buying the Switch 2 version because there's not enough of a performance boost to justify that increase in price. They even used Nintendo's own comparison screenshot screenshots as seen here between the Switch 1 and 2 versions. And as you're looking at it, you're kind of insane if you think there's any real difference there. The only real difference between the Switch 1 and 2 for Metroid, at least, as Vice states here, is actually its load times. On Switch 2, Prime 4 takes 24 seconds to load a new area. On Switch 1, it's upwards of like a minute or more. And for anyone who plays on Steam or PlayStation, you're probably laughing looking at that, because imagine waiting anything more than maybe 5 seconds max for something to load these days. It's just pretty sad how much Nintendo is just able to get away with in 2025 like this. You gotta pay $10 more for Metroid and buy a whole new console so that your game loads faster. It's bleak, dude. It really is. I also want to bring up another game in this video about how bloated and messed up the pricing of games and budgets really is these days. That game is Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Actually, this video will come out after the Game Awards, but it's being written and made before it airs. So let me guess, did Clair Obscur win Game of the Year ultimately? Let me know in the comments if I'm right or not. Either way, as 80level.com reported here, Sandfall finally revealed Clair's budget, and it was actually less than $10 million, which has rightfully embarrassed the entire AAA game industry, because what do you mean that this game costed a fraction of what most AAA games do these days? One of the reasons why it cost so little, as Sandfall said here talking to the New York Times, is that they avoided trends instead of chasing them, like making their game open world, for example, not being something that they wanted to do. Clair Obscur's creative director and CEO of Sandfall said this to the New York Times: "We have the tech now to make those games with a relatively small team. Games like this are coming. We are lucky to be early." 80 Level then showed how expensive most AAA games recently have been made for, as you can also see here. Borderlands 4 was upwards of $300 million somehow. Concord was 400, if you can believe it. Black Ops 7 ranged in the 450 to 700 range, and Mind's Eye somehow costed $500 million to make. The reason why I bring up this story in a video mostly about Nintendo is pretty simple. It's that the prices of everything from game development, how much things cost like consoles or even games, is completely and utterly out of whack these days. Clair Obscur could have easily been retailed as a fully priced $70 or even $80 Nintendo game, but they didn't do that. They went with $50 instead, which is kind of crazy in today's landscape, but if your game costs less than $10 million to make and you sold over 5 million copies already and then some, the amount made versus what it cost is gonna be crazy. It means actually that Clair Obscur made something like 17 times and then some its own budget already. The other reason why I bring this up is very simple too. Clair Obscur is what I think Nintendo should be doing price-wise to ensure that their ecosystem doesn't get dog-walked and then ruined by their insane price greed and increases in prices in general that are just going forward right now. Nintendo's games cost about as much as Clair Obscur's development usually does too, yet they charge $80 American per game now, making them money, sure, in that short run, but in the long run, I wonder how it will go for them with this change too. If the Switch 2 is already being bundled and discounted mere months after release, and they're having fears that people don't want to buy into their ecosystem at the same rate as a Switch 1, I can really only imagine that this price increase for the most part might not be going the way that Nintendo intended. The truth is that the Switch 2 would be far more incentivizing and worth owning if the first-party games weren't an arm and a leg to buy into as well. If Nintendo priced their games accordingly too, maybe in the $50 to $60 range, not only would they still make a lot of money anyways, it would also lower that barrier, while also justifying owning their console in the future over others too, if the whole thing is just cheaper to buy into. But the way that things are going right now, with a console destined to become more expensive since RAM prices are charging Nintendo upwards of 41% and more per each and every unit that they're making for customers to buy, this can only go so far before something has to change here. Either the Switch 2 needs to drop in price, or the games do, is what I'm trying to say. But the way that Nintendo is going right now, they are paywalling themselves and, in my opinion, ruining their own momentum going forward by trying to normalize this expensive hobby into now becoming something that only people with a lot of disposable incomes can actually comfortably enjoy these days. And with the way the market is going, many people do not in fact have disposable income these days like that. The exact opposite is actually going on for many. But in the end, what's going on is that Nintendo has just lost billions of dollars in market value. That cannot be denied. RAM prices are also going up, and currently their master plan is to just ignore all of this and just make you, the customer, pay for all of that difference instead. And how long until players just kind of give up and go with the the much cheaper, far more technologically powerful alternatives instead that are around them. I guess time will tell, but let me know what you think as always too. Thanks for watching, subscribe, and see you guys next time.